You'd think after 27 years of marriage, a man would know every inch of his wife, every flick of her expression, every habit, every tell. You'd think. But here's the thing. When people tell you marriage is about trust, they don't tell you it's also about routine. And routine can dull a man, make him lazy, make him stop noticing. Until one day, something yanks you out of it so hard your head spins. For me, it was a question about a damned clock. Now, this wasn't just any clock. It was a brass ship's clock my great-grandfather had hauled back from some forgotten port in the 1920s. Passed down to my grandfather, then my father, and finally me. I'd spent my boyhood watching it tick away the slow hours in my dad's woodshop, mesmerized by its deep, steady chime. When my father passed, I inherited the clock, along with the battered cherrywood workbench he'd built with his own hands. I mounted that clock on my shop wall where it belonged, not for sale, not for show, just there. So when my wife, Linda, walked into my shop one muggy June afternoon and said, "Hey, maybe it's time we sold that old clock," I damn near dropped the hand plane I was using. She tried to sound casual, but I knew that tone, the one that slid in between the words, oily and rehearsed. I set the plane down, wiped my hands on a rag. Why on earth would I sell that? She fluttered her hands in that way she always did when she was forcing patience. It's just, we could use the money right now. Property taxes are going up again, and the car needs a new transmission. Plus, who knows what it's really worth? You've always said it could fetch a good price. I hadn't always said that. I'd said it was priceless. Big difference. But I didn't argue. Not then. I just nodded and said I'd think about it. The thing about carpentry, the thing about years of sanding, chiseling, and planing, is that it teaches a man patience. You don't react. You don't jump. You observe. So I watched. In the days that followed, Linda got antsy, started hanging around my shop more often, bringing me coffee unasked, making small talk about the clock again. "Imagine what we could do with the money," she said once, eyes gleaming a little too bright. "Maybe take that trip we've been talking about." Except we hadn't been talking about any trip. And then there was the business with our daughter, Megan. Now Megan's a grown woman, 24, works at the local community college. Lies with us again since her last breakup. Independent as hell, stubborn like her mother. We'd always gotten along fine, until lately. Lately, she was giving me the cold shoulder for no reason I could see. One night I came in from the shop and caught the tail end of a conversation in the kitchen. The door was cracked just enough. Megan's voice, sharp and anxious. "Are you sure about this? I mean, what if he finds out?" Linda's voice, low and flat. "He won't. We'll handle it. You just focus on the future. Our future. Our future." That phrase hit me like a nail through the thumb. I stood there, back against the wall, heart thudding so hard I thought they'd hear it. But I didn't storm in. Didn't demand answers. No, that's not how you catch a liar. You let them spin the web, nice and wide. Then you pull. That night, I went to bed early. Laid there with the ceiling fan stirring the humid air, mind racing. I knew something was rotten. The question was, how deep did the rot go? The answer came faster than I expected. A few mornings later, I was in the laundry room folding towels. Linda had left her purse on the counter, wide open. Now, I'm not the type to snoop. Or at least, I wasn't. But something tugged at me. That same instinct that had told my father when a board was warped beneath the surface, even if it looked straight as an arrow. I glanced around. The house was empty. Megan had already left for work. Linda was out at yoga. I reached into the purse. Wallet. Keys. Lipstick. And then, a thin slip of pink paper folded in quarters. Pawn slip. My hands went ice cold. It was dated 2 weeks prior. The item listed, one brass maritime clock. Pawned for $850. I gripped the counter, knuckles white. So she had sold it. But here's the kicker. I'd just seen the clock hanging on my shop wall that morning. Which meant the one she pawned wasn't the real clock. Which meant she knew I'd never willingly part with it, and she'd snuck in and swapped it out with a fake. I didn't know whether to laugh or smash something. Instead, I took a breath. If she wanted to play games, fine. I'd play too. I drove straight to the pawn shop listed on the slip. Little place on the edge of town run by a guy named Pete. I'd done business with him a time or two, buying old hand tools. When I walked in, Pete looked up from behind the counter. "Hey, Hank, what brings you in?" I laid the slip on the glass. "Looking to buy this back." He peered at it, then at me. Something flickered in his eyes, sympathy, maybe. He knew Linda. Knew me too. Small towns have long memories. "Sure thing," he said quietly. Give me a minute. When he brought it out, I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. The fake was good, close enough to fool the casual eye. But the patina was wrong. The brass too bright. The hands too thick. I paid the fee, took the clock, and left. Back in my shop, I hung the fake next to the real one for a moment. Just stood there staring at them both. One was history. The other was a lie. I swapped them again, put the real one back in its rightful place. The fake went into an old shipping crate I stashed under the bench. Then I waited. Because the 4th of July block party was coming up, the biggest event in town. And I was about to give my wife the stage she didn't know she'd earned. But first, I needed more rope for her to hang herself with. And that, my friend, is where this story really begins. After that little pawn shop visit, I was a different man. I don't mean I was angry, though I was. I don't mean I was sad, hell no. I was alive. The way a man gets when a puzzle finally clicks into place and he knows exactly how to finish it. See, once you know you're living in a play someone else is writing, you get a choice. You can sit in the audience and watch your life unravel. Or you can climb on stage, rip up the script, and start improvising. I chose the second option. First thing I did was stop pretending. No more warm husband act. No more smiling through dinners or fake concern about Linda's little yoga trips. I kept it simple, polite, detached, mildly amused. The kind of man who's watching the world burn from a nice safe porch swing. Linda noticed. Oh, she noticed. Is everything okay, Hank? She asked over breakfast 2 days later, voice all sugar. Why wouldn't it be? I replied, deadpan, sipping my coffee. She searched my face for cracks. Found none. I could practically see her recalculating. The next clue came fast. Thursday night, I was out in the garage cleaning some old chisels when Megan pulled into the driveway. I heard her car door slam harder than usual. Voices followed, hers and Linda's, low but urgent. I cracked the garage door an inch and listened. You said it'd be simple, Megan hissed. You said it was just money for a few trips, not this. Linda's voice, sharp and cold. Plans change. We're almost there. Just stick to the story. Megan let out a shaky breath. And what about Dad? He's not stupid. Linda laughed, a sound that sent ice through my veins. Please. Your father is a sentimental fool. He'll roll over like he always does. I closed the door softly and leaned against it, heart thudding. A sentimental fool, huh? I'd show her just how foolish I could be. But before the 4th rolled around, I needed more proof and more bait. The next morning, while Linda was at one of her mysterious appointments, I took a little stroll through the house. Nothing invasive, just observing. In the upstairs guest room, a room nobody ever used, I found a suitcase half-packed under the bed. Clothes, toiletries, a travel guide to Charleston. Plane ticket stub inside a book, dated 2 weeks prior. So she'd already been flying out to see this mystery man. Probably more than once. I snapped a mental picture and left everything untouched. No need to tip my hand. Then I visited Megan's room. Not to pry, okay, maybe to pry, but because something had been gnawing at me. Why was my daughter, my fiercely loyal, no-nonsense daughter, involved in this? I didn't find much in her room. But on her desk, half buried under papers, was a framed photo I hadn't seen before. Her and Linda at some kind of fancy dinner. And next to them, a man I recognized. Professor Alan Grayson. Megan's old poli-sci professor from college. Slick, silver-haired, always the charmer. The kind of man who wore pocket squares unironically. I'd met him once at a college fundraiser, the type of handshake that lingers too long. The type of smile that never reaches the eyes. Now the pieces snapped into place so hard, I nearly laughed out loud. Megan had introduced him to Linda. Probably thought it was harmless at first. A friend. A mentor. Someone to talk to. Then he'd worked his poison. And now they were planning some grand escape, financed, at least in part, by my family's history. I put the photo back exactly where I found it and left the room. The clock ticked toward the 4th, and I began to prepare. First, I retrieved the fake clock from the shop, packed it carefully in a wooden crate lined with old straw. I wanted it to look authentic, like an heirloom gift. Then I wrote a little note. Simple, elegant, just enough to raise eyebrows. To my dearest daughter, Megan, for your new beginnings. With all my love, Dad. Because if they wanted a future together, well, I'd give them a real send-off. The morning of the block party dawned bright and hot. Our street always went all out, flags on every porch, barbecue smoke drifting through the air, kids running wild with sparklers. Linda, of course, was in high spirits, dressed to the nines. Makeup perfect. smiling that brittle smile she wore when she thought she was winning. She flitted around the yard setting up chairs and coolers, greeting neighbors like the queen of the block. I watched from the porch, beer in hand, amused. Around noon, Megan arrived, tense, eyes darting. We exchanged polite hellos. And then, right before the big gathering started, I brought out the crate, set it on the table beneath the big elm tree. Curious glances followed me. "What's that, Hank?" asked old Bill from 2 doors down. "Just a little gift," I said with a slow smile. Thought the timing was right. Linda's eyes narrowed. Megan looked pale. As the crowd gathered, a good 30 people by then, I cleared my throat. "Folks," I began, raising my glass. "Before we dig into the burgers, I wanted to say a few words. As you all know, family means everything to me. And nothing says family like passing down the things that matter, not just objects, but stories, legacies." I rested a hand on the crate. "This clock has been in my family for generations. My great-grandfather brought it home nearly a century ago. And while it's worth a fair bit of money, it's priceless to me for what it represents." I glanced at Linda. Her face was frozen, smile brittle as glass. "And now," I continued, voice calm, "it's time to pass it on. To my daughter, who I know has big plans ahead." Megan's eyes widened in panic. I flipped the lid off the crate. There, gleaming too brightly in the sun, sat the fake clock. The pawn shop special. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I picked it up carefully and held it high. "Of course," I said, voice dropping, "this isn't the real clock. The real one's safe and sound in my shop." Dead silence now. Every eye on us. "This one," I said, gaze locking on Linda, "is the one that was pawned behind my back to fund certain extracurricular activities." Gasps. Whispers. Linda went pale. Megan looked ready to bolt. "And as for the man behind it all," I said, turning to the crowd, "you may know him, Professor Alan Grayson, courtesy of my daughter's introduction." A collective intake of breath. Megan's voice cracked. "Dad, but I held up a hand. "No need, sweetheart. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way." I set the fake clock back in the crate. "Happy 4th, everyone," I said. "Enjoy the fireworks." Then I walked off to get another beer, leaving the stunned silence behind me. And that, my friend, was just the beginning. Because the fallout? Oh, that was going to be spectacular. You'd think after a stunt like that, a man would feel satisfied. Triumphant, even. I didn't. Not right away. See, revenge is a funny thing. Everyone pictures the moment, the reveal, the gasps, the look on the cheater's face. What they don't tell you is what comes after. The silence. The tension. The endless little ways the people around you recalibrate. I woke up the next morning to an empty house. Linda was gone. Megan too. No note, no text. Not that I expected one. The phone stayed quiet all day. Neighbors avoided eye contact when I walked out to fetch the paper. The ones who did speak kept their tone light, nervous, like I was a man who might snap at any second. Which suited me just fine. Let him wonder. Around noon, I poured myself a tall glass of iced tea, sat on the porch, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Megan was the first to crack. Around 3 p.m., her little silver hatchback rolled up the driveway. She got out slowly, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. I stayed put, rocking gently on the swing. She walked up the steps and stopped a few feet away. "Dad," she began, voice thin, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I asked, sipping my tea. She flinched, took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged. "I didn't know it would go this far," she said. "I swear. I just introduced them. I thought Mom needed a friend. Someone to talk to. After everything." I raised an eyebrow. "After what?" She swallowed. "After you started pulling away." Now that was rich. "I wasn't pulling away, Megan," I said evenly. "I was trying to survive a marriage where I was being lied to in my own home. Bit of a difference." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't know. She told me you didn't care anymore. That you were checked out. That you wouldn't notice if she needed space." I let out a low laugh. "Oh, I noticed." She covered her face with her hands. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant." I cut her off gently. "Megan, listen. You're an adult. You made choices. So did your mother. Now you have to live with them." She looked up, pleading. "Please, can we fix this?" I shook my head. Some things don't get fixed. They get replaced. Silence hung between us. Finally, she whispered, "Where is Mom?" "Not here," I said simply. "And if she knows what's good for her, She'll stay that way for a while. Megan's shoulders sagged. Without another word, she turned and walked back to her car. I watched her drive off, heart heavy but clear. One down, one to go. Because Linda? She still hadn't shown her face. That evening, I made dinner for one. Sat at the kitchen table under the soft glow of the overhead light, chewing slowly. Halfway through my steak, the front door opened. Linda. She stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, looking like hell. Hair a mess, eyes bloodshot, lips trembling. I set my fork down and leaned back. Evening. She stared at me, face crumpling. Hank. I held up a hand. Before you say a word, let me ask you something. She blinked. What? Did you think I wouldn't find out? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't mean for it to. I snorted. Spare me. You pawned a family heirloom. You planned a little getaway with your silver-haired Romeo. You dragged our daughter into it. That doesn't happen by accident. She sank into the nearest chair, face in her hands. I was lost, Hank. You don't understand. You stopped seeing me. Stopped talking. The house felt dead. I stared at her, disgusted. And your solution was to burn it all down? She sobbed harder. For a moment, I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just a kind of cool detachment. You know what the worst part is? I said softly. You sold our past for a fling. But you underestimated one thing. She looked up, eyes desperate. What? I smiled thinly. I'm not as sentimental as you thought. With that, I stood and walked out of the room, leaving her to her tears. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was heartbroken. No, that ship had sailed. But because I wasn't finished. Not yet. The block party had been step one. Public exposure. Now it was time for step two. See, small towns love a scandal. But they love a fall from grace even more. And Alan Grayson? The man who fancied himself too clever for consequences? He had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I paid a visit to a friend of mine, Joe Simmons. Retired cop. Runs the local VFW hall. Knows everybody. We sat over black coffee in the dusty back office. Joe, I said, you still got contacts at the college? He grinned. Depends who you want to talk to. Faculty board, I replied. Grayson's up for a full professorship next month. I think they'd want to know who they're promoting. Joe let out a low whistle. Damn, Hank. You're playing hardball. I shrugged. Man sleeps with my wife, uses my daughter to do it, and helps steal from my family? Yeah, he's earned it. Joe nodded slowly. I'll make a few calls. By the time I left the VFW, the wheels were in motion. Next, I visited Pete at the pawn shop. Pete, I said, you remember that fake clock? He chuckled. Hard to forget. I need a receipt, I said. Something official. Shows who pawned it. He leaned back. That might ruffle feathers. I smiled. Good thing you owe me a favor. An hour later, I walked out with the slip, Linda's signature clear as day. By noon, I had everything I needed. I spent the afternoon drafting a little packet, copies of the pawn slip, a statement from Pete, he was more than happy to oblige, and a polite letter to the faculty board detailing Professor Grayson's extracurricular activities. I mailed it off that evening with a smile. Now all that was left was to wait. And believe me, patience is a skill I've mastered. Because when the fall came, I wanted front row seats. Patience, they say, is a virtue. I say it's a weapon. See, most people, when they're wronged, they rush straight to revenge. Shouting matches, smash dishes, slam doors. All it does is tip your hand and make you look like a fool. Me? I prefer the slow burn. Let the embers smolder until they're hot enough to ignite the whole damned house. So after I mailed that little packet to the college board, I did exactly nothing. I didn't confront Linda again. Didn't hound Megan. Didn't march into Grayson's office waving receipts. I simply waited. And sure enough, within 3 days, the first smoke started rising. It was a Tuesday morning. I was out front trimming the hedges when Bill, my neighbor 2 doors down, strolled over, coffee mug in hand. You hear about the college? He asked, eyes twinkling. I played dumb. Nope. What's up? He leaned in conspiratorially. Some kind of scandal with one of the professors. Rumor is it's that Grayson fella. Supposedly slept with a faculty member's wife. Board's in a tizzy. I raised an eyebrow. Well, who'd have thought? Bill chuckled. Small town, Hank. Word gets around. I smiled politely and went back to trimming. Inside, though, I was grinning like the cat that ate the canary. Step 2 was working. That afternoon, the phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. Megan. I let it ring twice, then picked up. "Dad." Her voice was shaky. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked evenly. "Alan's in trouble," she blurted. "The faculty board got some kind of packet. With receipts. Statements. About him. About Mom. They're launching an investigation." I leaned back in my chair, tone mild. "Imagine that." She hesitated. "Did you send it?" I sipped my coffee. "Megan, actions have consequences. That's a lesson worth learning." She started crying softly. "Dad, I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't know." I cut her off. "Stop. You introduced him. You enabled them. You lied to me. You did know. Maybe not at first, but you knew enough." Silence. Then, a whisper. "I'm sorry." "For what it's worth," I said, voice soft, "you're still my daughter. But trust has to be earned back." The line went dead. I set the phone down and stared out the window, heart heavy. See, I loved my daughter. Always would. But love doesn't blind me anymore. Not after this. The next bomb dropped that Friday. Linda came home late, looking like she'd been dragged through a hurricane. Hair disheveled. Makeup smudged. Eyes wild. I was sitting in the living room, newspaper in hand. She burst in, voice shrill. "Hank, what did you do?" I folded the paper calmly. "Evening to you too." She paced like a caged animal. "Alan's being investigated. They're talking about revoking his tenure bid. He's furious. He says someone sent proof of the pawn slip, of everything." I set the paper down and met her gaze. "Maybe you should have thought about that before seducing a married woman and using her daughter as a go-between." Tears streamed down her face. "You've ruined us." I laughed. A cold, dry sound. "I ruined us?" "Linda, you burned this house down long before I struck a match." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. "I didn't mean to." I stood, voice hard. "Save it. I'm done listening to excuses." I left her there and retreated to my shop. The next week passed in a strange haze. The town buzzed with gossip. Grayson was put on administrative leave pending the investigation. The college board was tight-lipped, but word had spread. Megan stayed away. Linda slunk around the house like a ghost. And me? I felt lighter. Not happy. Not smug. Just unburdened. Then, one rainy Wednesday evening, the final twist dropped in my lap. It was late. I was in the shop, working on a maple rocking chair, when headlights swept across the driveway. I wiped my hands and opened the door. Megan stood there, soaked to the bone, eyes red. "Dad," she choked, "I need to tell you something." I led her inside, handed her a towel. She sat trembling, clutching the fabric. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," she whispered. "Alan, he told me things. Promised things. Said he'd help my career. Help Mom get out of her rut." I believed him. I thought I was helping. I nodded, letting her talk. She drew a shaky breath. "But there's more. I found out. He's done this before. Other women. Other faculty. He's been grooming people for years. Quietly. Carefully." I stared at her, cold dread creeping in. "I went to the board," she continued. "I told them everything. About me. About Mom. About the other women. I couldn't keep it in anymore." I swallowed hard. That took guts. She broke down sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Dad. For everything. I was so stupid." I put a hand on her shoulder, voice soft. "You were naive. Not stupid. You learned. That matters." She clung to me like a child. For a long time, we sat there in the dim light, rain pounding the windows. Finally, she pulled away, eyes clear. "What happens now?" she asked. I smiled grimly. "Now? Now we watch the house of cards fall. Because mark my words, it was falling. And when it did, I planned to be standing tall amid the rubble. When a house of cards falls, it doesn't topple all at once. No, it starts with a tremble, one tiny shift that makes the whole thing quiver. Then a corner slips. A few cards flutter. And before you know it, the whole thing comes down in a glorious mess." By the time Megan showed up soaked and broken in my shop, that house had already begun to shake. I knew it. And more importantly, so did Grayson. Word around town moved fast. Joe Simmons kept me updated over beers at the VFW. According to his contacts at the college, the board wasn't just looking at Grayson's relationship with Linda anymore. No, they'd cracked the lid off something much bigger. Turns out, when Megan confessed and named names, a few other women found their spines. Quiet emails started landing in the board's inbox. Allegations. Stories. Patterns. The sort of thing that made tenure bids evaporate faster than spit on a griddle. And Grayson? He was feeling the heat. Rumor had it he'd started ducking public appearances, skipped 2 department meetings, took to working from home. The predator was cornered. Meanwhile, at my house, the air grew thick with tension. Linda barely spoke. She slunk around like a ghost, eyes hollow, skin pale. Meals went untouched. Calls went unanswered. One night, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, fingers trembling around a glass of whiskey. I leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. She looked up, voice raw. "It's over." I said nothing. "He's finished," she whispered. "The board, they've got everything." The other women came forward. "They're stripping his title, terminating his contract." I let the silence stretch. "He's blaming me," she choked. "Says I ruined him. Says I used him." That one almost made me laugh. The man who'd seduced half the faculty playing the victim? Fitting. She looked at me then, really looked. For the first time in weeks. "Hank," she said softly, I've made terrible mistakes." "No kidding," I said dryly. Tears welled in her eyes. "I lost sight of everything. Of what mattered. I thought I needed more. Excitement. Freedom. I was wrong." I tilted my head. "You pawned a family heirloom. Lied to me. Involved our daughter. And jumped into bed with a manipulative snake. That's more than a mistake, Linda." She sobbed. "Please. I want to make it right." I pushed off the doorway, voice cold. Some things don't get fixed. Some things get replaced. I walked out, leaving her to her whiskey and regret. The next morning brought the final blow. A front-page article in the local paper. "Professor resigns amid scandal, pattern of misconduct exposed." They didn't name names in print, but everyone knew. Small town. Big gossip. At the VFW that afternoon, the place buzzed. Old-timers slapped me on the back. "Hell of a thing, Hank. You handled it like a pro. About time someone took that arrogant bastard down." I just nodded, sipping my beer. I wasn't in it for the praise. I was in it for the principle. Later that evening, Megan came by again. Her eyes were clearer this time, shoulders straighter. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly, "for not giving up on me." I nodded. "You learned the hard way. That matters." She bit her lip. "I'm moving out. Got an apartment near campus. I need space. To think. To heal." I smiled faintly. "Good choice." She hesitated. "And Mom, she wants to talk to you." I sighed. "Let her come." An hour later, Linda appeared, pale and shaking. She stood in the doorway of my shop, eyes glistening. "I'm leaving," she said. I can't stay here after what I've done." I leaned back on my stool, hands folded. "Where will you go?" "My sister's. For now. Until I figure things out." I nodded. "Fair enough." She stepped closer, voice trembling. "Hank, I'm so sorry. Truly. I don't expect forgiveness. I needed you to know." I studied her, seeing not the woman I'd loved once, but a stranger shaped like her. "You lost my trust, Linda. That's not something words can fix." She nodded, tears spilling. "Goodbye, Hank." And just like that, she was gone. The house felt lighter, quieter. I sat in my shop long after the sun set, the real clock ticking softly on the wall. A symbol of endurance, of legacy, of lessons learned. I'd lost a wife, but I'd kept my dignity, my family's name, my peace. And sometimes, my friend, that's worth more than any happy ending. Freedom is an odd thing. Most folks think it's a grand gesture, quitting a job, moving across the country, shouting "I'm free" to the heavens. But sometimes, freedom comes quietly, like a stiff breeze blowing through an old house, clearing out the dust. That's what my house felt like after Linda left. Quiet. Still. A little hollow, sure, but clean. I wasn't naive. I knew healing would take time. But damn, it felt good to walk through my own home without the weight of lies pressing down on me. Megan kept her distance, which I respected. She needed space to sort her head out. I threw myself into my shop. Built 2 rocking chairs, a cherrywood dining table, and a set of maple picture frames in a month flat. Nothing like honest work to clean the soul. The town buzzed for a while. Grayson's fall was the talk of every coffee shop and bar. Turns out, after the faculty board finished digging, they not only revoked his tenure bid, they forced his resignation. Word was, a few legal threats were floating in the air too. Serve the bastard right. Linda disappeared from public life. Pulled up at her sister's house 2 towns over. Occasionally, word trickled back. She was a mess. Depressed. Drinking too much. Burning bridges. Part of me pitied her. The rest of me? Well, choices have consequences. And then came the letter. It arrived on a crisp October morning. I was sanding a cabinet door when the mailman waved an envelope at me. Handwritten. No return address. I opened it on the porch, coffee steaming beside me. Dear Hank, if you're reading this, you know by now how sorry I am for everything. I've lost so much. My family, my reputation, my self-respect. I have no right to ask you for anything, but there's something you should know. Alan, he was using me. I see that now. I wasn't his first conquest, and I wouldn't have been his last. He told me what I wanted to hear, promised me a new life. But what I didn't know, and what you deserve to know, is that Megan wasn't the one who introduced him to me. It was me. I sought him out first. I pursued him. When Megan found out, she begged me to stop. I manipulated her, lied to her, made her feel responsible. The fault is mine. All of it. Please don't punish her for my sins. I know I can't fix what I've done. I only hope someday you'll find peace. Linda, ****. I sat there for a long while, letter trembling in my hands. The twist landed like a hammer. All this time, I thought Megan had enabled the affair. Been the naive go-between. But the truth was far uglier. Linda had used our own daughter as a shield, twisted her trust, made her complicit in something she'd tried to stop. Rage simmered under my skin, not the hot kind that clouds your mind. The cold, steady kind that sharpens it. I folded the letter carefully, locked it in my desk. That afternoon, I called Megan. Come by the house, I said simply. We need to talk. She arrived within the hour, eyes wary. We sat in the kitchen, the old clock ticking softly in the background. I slid the letter across the table. Read it. Her hand shook as she unfolded the paper. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face. I didn't know she wrote this, she whispered. I tried to tell her it was wrong. I begged her. I reached across and squeezed her hand. I know now. She sobbed openly. I thought you hated me. I shook my head. I was hurt. But hate? Never. We sat there for a long while, father and daughter bound by the scars of betrayal and the promise of healing. Over the next weeks, Megan and I rebuilt our bond. Slowly. Honestly. She moved back in for a time, helping around the house, sharing meals, laughing again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And Linda? I never saw her again. Word was, she moved out west. Tried to start over. Part of me hopes she finds peace. The other part knows some debts can't be repaid. As for Grayson, last I heard, he'd packed up and left town. Career in shambles. Reputation shot. Good riddance. Life settled into a new rhythm. The shop thrived. Orders poured in. Neighbors dropped by more often, respect in their eyes. They'd seen a man stand tall when it mattered. That's worth more than gold in a small town. And that old clock? Still ticks in my shop. Steady. Unbroken. A symbol of resilience. Sometimes I sit beneath it with a cold beer, watching the hands sweep the hours away. Not bitter. Not angry. Just free. Because in the end, freedom isn't about forgetting the past. It's about knowing it can't touch you anymore. And that, my friend, is the best revenge of all. Subscribe to the channel